Check her bag. She took it. The words cracked through the air like something heavier than sound. Something final. Something that didn't ask for truth, only obedience. And for a split second the entire store froze under the harsh white lights. Carts half-turned. Receipts still printing. Conversations cut mid-breath as every head turned toward the same point of gravity where Rebecca Collins stood, perfectly composed. One manicured hand extended like a verdict already passed. Her gaze locked on Maya Thompson as if she had already decided what kind of person she was. And all Maya felt in that moment wasn't fear, not exactly, but a tightening in her chest, a quiet recognition of something she had lived before, something that didn't need proof to exist, only an accusation spoken loudly enough to become real. And when Rebecca stepped closer, her heels clicking sharp against the polished tile, the sound echoing like a countdown, Maya didn't step back, didn't raise her voice, didn't try to fill the silence that had swallowed the room. Because she knew how quickly words could be twisted, how easily they could be used against her. And instead she held still, her fingers curled lightly at her sides, her breath slow and controlled as if the air itself had weight. And somewhere behind her a phone lifted, then another, small glowing rectangles catching everything, recording without judgment, without context, just capturing what was visible while everything that mattered stayed hidden beneath the surface. And Rebecca's voice came again, sharper now, carrying across aisles and displays. I saw her. She switched it. Right there. And it wasn't just the words, it was the certainty behind them, the way they wrapped around the space and squeezed it tight, leaving no room for doubt. And a store employee hesitated, eyes flicking between them, unsure where to stand, because this wasn't just about a missing item anymore. It was about something older, something deeper that lived in the space between who was believed and who had to prove themselves. And Maya finally lifted her eyes, meeting Rebecca's stare not with anger, not with defiance, but with something quieter, something steadier. A kind of calm that didn't ask permission. And when she spoke, her voice was low but clear enough to cut through the tension. You can check, she said, each word placed carefully, deliberately. I have nothing to hide. And for a moment, just a moment, the room shifted, not enough to change anything yet, but enough for something unseen to begin moving, because above them, unnoticed by most, a small black dome in the ceiling continued to blink softly, capturing everything, not just what was said, but what was done, every motion, every second, waiting patiently for the moment someone would finally decide to look. The manager stepped forward slowly, not rushing, not choosing a side yet, his shoes barely making a sound against the tile, as if even he understood that anything too sudden might break whatever fragile balance was holding the moment together. And Maya could feel every pair of eyes still fixed on her, not with certainty now, but with curiosity, with that quiet hunger people have when they sense something is about to unfold, something they will talk about later. And she kept her posture straight even as her pulse pressed harder against her ribs, because she had learned long ago that how you stand matters just as much as what you say when people are deciding who you are. And Rebecca crossed her arms, her expression unchanged, confident, almost impatient, like someone waiting for the obvious to be confirmed. Well, she said, her voice softer now, but edged with expectation, as if the outcome was already hers. And the manager glanced at Maya's bag on the floor, its contents scattered in plain sight. Nothing unusual, nothing hidden, just the ordinary pieces of a life carried between long shifts and quiet routines, a wallet worn at the edges, a folded receipt, a small notebook with creased corners. And for a second his hesitation stretched, thin and visible, before he spoke. We can review the footage, he said carefully, and the words seemed to settle over the space like a shift in temperature, subtle but undeniable. And Maya exhaled slowly. Not relief. Not yet. Just a release of the breath she had been holding, because she knew that truth did not always arrive the way people expected. Sometimes it took its time. Sometimes it had to fight to be seen. And behind them the faint hum of the ceiling units filled the silence, steady, mechanical, indifferent to everything happening below. And one of the employees moved toward the back office, her steps quick, almost eager, as if drawn by the gravity of what might be revealed. And Rebecca tilted her head slightly, watching Maya with a look that was no longer just accusation, but something sharper, something probing. as if trying to understand why Maya was not reacting the way she should, why she was not breaking under the weight of the moment. And Maya met that look without flinching, her eyes steady, her voice quiet when she spoke again. "It is all there," she said, not to Rebecca, not to anyone in particular, but to the room itself, to the unseen presence of the camera above them, to the truth that had been recorded without bias. And for a brief second something flickered across Rebecca's face. Too quick to name, too subtle for most to catch, but it was there, a crack in the certainty, a shift so small it could have been imagined, and then it was gone, replaced by the same composed expression, the same controlled posture, but the air had already changed, and as the office door swung open in the distance, a faint glow from the monitor spilling into the hallway, the entire store seemed to lean in without moving, waiting, not just to see what happened next, but to understand what had already happened without them realizing it. The hallway light from the office flickered softly against the polished floor as the employee returned, her face different now, not alarmed, not confused, but focused in a way that drew attention without a single word, and the manager followed close behind her, holding a small tablet in his hands, the screen casting a pale glow across his expression, and for a moment he did not speak, did not rush, as if even he understood that what was about to be shown would not just answer a question but change the shape of everything that had just happened, and Maya felt the shift before anyone said anything, a subtle change in the air, like the moment before rain when the world holds its breath, and Rebecca noticed it too, her posture tightening almost imperceptibly, her arms no longer folded as firmly, her fingers adjusting the strap of her purse in a movement that looked casual but was not, and the manager finally looked up, scanning the room, not just at Maya, not just at Rebecca, but at everyone watching, because now they were all part of it, all witnesses, all waiting. And he turned the tablet slightly so the nearest customers could see, then angled it toward Rebecca, then toward Maya, making sure there was no question about what was being shown, and the footage began to play, grainy but clear enough, the timestamp blinking steadily in the corner, seconds counting down to something no one had yet named. And there was Rebecca, earlier, walking through the same aisle, her movements smooth, confident, familiar, nothing out of place at first glance, until the angle shifted just enough. Just one step closer to the shelf, just one glance over her shoulder that lingered a second too long, and the room seemed to lean in without moving, breath slowing, conversations gone, replaced by the quiet hum of anticipation, and Maya watched without expression, her eyes steady on the screen, not searching, not hoping, just observing, because she already knew what she had not done, and that was enough. And the footage continued, Rebecca reaching for an item, then another, her hand moving with practiced ease, not rushed, not hesitant, and then something subtle, something easy to miss if you were not looking closely, the shift of a label, the movement of a tag, a motion so small it almost disappeared into the flow of everything else. But it was there, recorded, undeniable, and someone near the front let out a quiet breath they did not realize they had been holding, and Rebecca's reflection in the tablet glass betrayed her before her face did, the flicker of recognition, the tightening at the corner of her eyes, the realization not that she had been caught in the moment, but that something she believed invisible had been seen all along, and the manager paused the video, not at the beginning, not at the end, but right at that frame, that single second where intention could no longer hide behind assumption, and the silence that followed was heavier than before, no longer filled with accusation, but with understanding, slow and spreading, like light reaching corners that had been ignored, and Maya stood exactly where she had been, unchanged, untouched, but the space around her had shifted completely, and for the first time since the words had been spoken, no one was looking at her as if they already knew her story, because now they were seeing something else entirely, something that had been there from the start, waiting to be noticed. No one spoke at first, not because they did not understand what they had just seen, but because understanding it required them to let go of what they had already believed, and that took time. And the manager lowered the tablet slowly, his grip tightening slightly around the edges, as if even holding the truth carried weight. And Rebecca stood very still, her shoulders no longer squared with confidence but held in place by something quieter, something closer to calculation, her eyes not on Maya anymore, but on the frozen image still lingering in her mind. that single frame that refused to disappear, and for a moment it looked like she might say something, might reshape the narrative the way she had done so easily before, but no words came, because this was different. This was not about persuasion or presence. This was something fixed, something recorded, and the people around them shifted, not dramatically, not all at once, but enough to be felt, a step back here, a glance redirected there, the invisible alignment of attention moving away from Maya and settling somewhere else, somewhere less comfortable, and Maya noticed it without turning her head, without changing her stance, because she had learned to read rooms long before this moment, to feel when the current changed even before it became visible. And the manager finally cleared his throat, the sound soft but cutting through the silence like a signal that something needed to move forward. "It looks like there was a misunderstanding," he said carefully, choosing words that tried to soften what could not really be softened. And Rebecca blinked once, slowly, as if the sentence had reached her from a distance, as if she needed a second to decide whether to accept it or resist it. And when she spoke, her voice was quieter than before, controlled but no longer certain. "That is not what it looks like," she said. But the words lacked the sharp edge they had carried earlier, and no one responded, not immediately. Because now there was something else present in the space, something heavier than accusation, heavier than defense, something closer to truth settling into place whether anyone welcomed it or not. And the manager did not argue, did not raise his voice. He simply turned the tablet again, rewinding a few seconds, letting the footage play once more, slower this time, more deliberate, giving every eye in the room the chance to see what had already been seen. And the repetition did not change the image, it only made it clearer, harder to ignore, and Rebecca's hand tightened around her purse strap again, the small motion betraying what her expression tried to contain. And Maya remained still, her breathing even, her gaze steady, not on Rebecca, not on the crowd, but somewhere just past them, as if she had already stepped beyond the moment while everyone else was still catching up. And in that quiet space, something unspoken passed through the room, not a verdict spoken aloud, but a recognition shared without words, that what had been assumed so quickly had not only been wrong, but had revealed something else entirely, something that could not be undone simply by changing the story. And for the first time since it began, the silence no longer belonged to accusation. It belonged to consequence. The silence did not break all at once. It shifted, slowly, like something heavy being moved across the floor, and the customers who had once leaned in with curiosity now leaned back with something closer to discomfort. Their eyes no longer searching Maya, but drifting away from Rebecca, avoiding the center of what had just been revealed. And the manager straightened slightly, his voice still measured but firmer now. "Ma'am, we are going to need to review your purchases," he said, not accusing, not raising his tone, but no longer offering the same careful neutrality. And Rebecca let out a small breath that sounded almost like a laugh, except it carried no humor, only tension stretched too thin. "This is ridiculous," she replied, her words quick, trying to regain ground that had already shifted beneath her. But the room did not follow her this time. No one echoed her tone. No one stepped in to support the certainty she had worn so easily before, and that absence said more than any argument could have. And Maya felt it clearly, the change in weight, the way attention had moved away from her like a tide pulling back, leaving behind something quieter, something steadier, and she did not move forward, did not step into it. She simply stood, her hands relaxed at her sides, her breathing even, because she understood that this moment did not belong to her victory. It belonged to the truth revealing itself. And the manager gestured gently toward the counter, not forceful, not urgent, but unmistakable. And Rebecca hesitated, just for a second, long enough for everyone to see that hesitation, long enough for the image of certainty to fracture. And when she finally moved, it was slower than before, her steps no longer sharp, no longer commanding, but measured, careful, as if each one required thought. And the small items in her cart suddenly seemed heavier, more visible, as if they carried more than their weight in ounces, as if they held the quiet evidence of something that had been hidden in plain sight. And one of the employees began scanning them again, each beep echoing softly in the air, steady, methodical, and the sound filled the space in a way that words no longer could. Because now the story was not being told through voices. It was being revealed through small, undeniable details, and Rebecca's gaze flickered once toward Maya. Quick, almost involuntary, but Maya did not meet it, not out of avoidance, but because she no longer needed to, and that absence of reaction, that refusal to engage in the exchange Rebecca seemed to expect, only deepened the silence around her, and the manager glanced once more at the tablet, then back at Rebecca, and this time his voice carried a quiet finality. "We will need to resolve this properly," he said, and the words settled into the space like something closing, not loud, not dramatic, but definite. And the people watching understood without being told that the moment had crossed a line, that it was no longer about suspicion or explanation, but about consequence. And Maya remained where she was, unchanged, steady. As the scene continued to unfold around her, no longer the center of accusation, but the still point in a room that was finally beginning to see clearly, the beeping stopped, not abruptly, but one note at a time, until the last item rested on the counter, and the screen displayed a number that felt smaller than the weight it carried. And the employee did not move right away, her hand hovering over the register as if waiting for something that could not be scanned. And the manager watched quietly, his attention no longer divided. His posture settled into something more grounded, more certain. And Rebecca stood there with her hands resting lightly against the edge of the counter, her fingers still, her shoulders drawn inward just enough to reveal what she was trying to contain, and the bright overhead lights that once seemed ordinary now felt sharper, exposing every detail, every shift in expression, every flicker of hesitation that could not be hidden. And the air itself felt different, not tense in the same way as before, but heavier, as if the room had absorbed everything that had happened and was holding it there, refusing to let it disappear. And Maya remained a few steps away, no longer washed with suspicion, no longer surrounded by whispers, but still present in a way that anchored the space, her breathing slow, her gaze soft but steady, not seeking attention, not avoiding it, simply existing within the moment without trying to reshape it. And somewhere near the entrance a door opened and closed, the sound distant, almost disconnected from what was unfolding inside. And a customer shifted their weight, then another, subtle movements that signaled the crowd beginning to loosen, to step back from the center now that the direction of the story had changed. And the manager finally spoke again, his voice low but clear. "We will take care of this internally," he said, not addressing anyone directly, but making it known that the situation had moved beyond public speculation. And Rebecca inhaled slowly, the breath measured, controlled, as if she were trying to gather herself piece by piece. And when she lifted her head, her expression was composed again, but not in the same way as before, not built on certainty, but on effort, on the deliberate choice to hold something together that had already begun to unravel. And her eyes flicked once more toward Maya, lingering just a second longer this time, as if searching for something, a reaction, a challenge, an opening. But Maya did not offer any of those things. She simply stood, her presence quiet, her dignity intact, and that stillness, that refusal to engage in the exchange that had once been forced upon her, shifted something deeper than any argument could have. And the manager nodded slightly to the employee, who began to clear the counter, her movements careful, respectful, as if handling more than just merchandise. And the ceiling camera above continued its silent observation, unchanged, recording without pause, its small red lights steady, indifferent. But in that moment it felt almost symbolic, not just a device, but a witness to something that had unfolded beyond its lens, something that could not be undone or edited, only remembered. And as the room settled into this new quiet, it became clear that the moment had not ended. It had transformed, and what remained was not the echo of accusation, but the weight of what had been revealed. In the space it left behind, the space did not return to normal. It only rearranged itself around what had already happened, and Rebecca remained at the counter a moment longer than necessary, her hand still resting against the edge as if she needed something solid to anchor her. And when she finally pulled it back, the movement was slow, deliberate, not the sharp confidence she had carried earlier, but something more measured, more aware. And she turned slightly, just enough to face Maya fully for the first time since the footage had played. Not across a distance of accusation, but within a shared space that now felt very different, and the room seemed to notice. Conversations that had not yet resumed stayed quiet, attention drawn once more, not out of spectacle this time, but out of something closer to expectation. And Rebecca opened her mouth as if to speak, then paused, the words catching somewhere between intention and consequence. And when they finally came, they were quieter than anyone would have expected. "I did not realize," she said, the sentence incomplete, hovering, not quite an apology, not quite a defense, and it lingered in the air without landing, because there was no easy place for it to settle. And Maya watched her for a brief second, her expression unchanged, not hardened, not softened, simply present, and that presence held more weight than any response could have, because it did not rush to fill the silence. It allowed it to exist. And Rebecca's gaze shifted again, a flicker of something deeper passing through it, something that looked less like control and more like recognition, not of what had been proven on the screen, but of what had been assumed before it ever played. And the manager stood nearby, not interrupting, not stepping in, understanding that this moment did not belong to policy or procedure, but to something more human, more difficult to define. And the store around them began to move again, slowly, carts rolling, quiet conversations returning in low tones, but the center of the room still held its gravity, still carried the imprint of what had unfolded. And Maya finally spoke, her voice calm, steady, not raised, not lowered. "You were sure," she said, not accusing, not questioning, simply stating what had been, and the words settled between them with a clarity that did not need explanation. And Rebecca did not respond immediately, because there was no easy answer to that, no way to reshape certainty once it had been revealed as something else. And for a moment she looked at Maya not as someone to confront or dismiss, but as someone she had not truly seen before. And that realization, quiet as it was, carried its own weight, heavier than any accusation had been. And the ceiling camera continued its silent watch, capturing this exchange just as it had captured everything else. But this part, this shift, this understanding, could not be measured in frames or timestamps. It existed in the space between words, in the pause before response, in the stillness that followed truth. And as Rebecca finally lowered her gaze, just slightly, the movement almost unnoticeable, the room did not react, did not respond, but something had already changed, something that would not return to what it had been before, because once seen, it could not be unseen. And Maya remained where she was, steady, unchanged, not needing to move forward or step away, because the moment had already done what it needed to do. Rebecca did not look up right away, her gaze fixed somewhere near the edge of the counter, as if the surface held something easier to face than the space around her. And the pause stretched, not awkward, not empty, but full of something settling into place, something that could not be undone by speaking faster or louder. And when she finally lifted her eyes again, the change was subtle but unmistakable, not dramatic, not sudden, but present in the way her shoulders no longer carried the same certainty, in the way her voice, when it came, no longer tried to control the room. "I should not have assumed," she said, the words simple, almost quiet, but heavier than anything she had said before. And they landed differently, not because they fixed what had happened, but because they acknowledged it, and the people nearby heard it, even those who pretended not to listen, because silence has a way of amplifying truth when it finally arrives. And Maya stood still, her expression calm, her posture unchanged, not stepping forward to accept, not stepping back to avoid, simply allowing the moment to exist without rushing it toward resolution. And that stillness gave the words space, not to disappear, but to be understood. And Rebecca's hand moved slightly, fingers adjusting against the strap of her purse again, a small, familiar gesture now carrying a different meaning, less about control, more about grounding herself in a moment she could no longer shape. And the manager remained nearby, his presence steady but unobtrusive, watching without interrupting, because this part did not belong to store policy or procedure. It belonged to something quieter, something human. And the store continued its slow return to motion, carts rolling, scanners beeping softly in the distance. But none of it erased what had just happened. It only framed it within the ordinary, making the contrast sharper, more real. and Maya finally spoke, her voice even, not raised, not softened. "It is not about the bag," she said, her words measured, each one clear, and Rebecca listened, not interrupting, not deflecting, because there was nothing left to deflect, and Maya continued, "It is about what you saw before you even looked." And the sentence settled into the space between them, not as an accusation, but as a truth that did not need to be argued, and Rebecca's eyes shifted slightly, not away this time, but inward, as if the meaning had reached somewhere deeper than the moment itself, and she nodded once, small, almost imperceptible, but enough to show that something had been understood, even if it was not yet fully processed, and the ceiling camera remained above them, its quiet presence unchanged, capturing the scene without judgment. But what mattered now was no longer what it recorded, it was what could not be recorded, the shift in awareness, the quiet recognition that lingered after the words had been spoken, and as Rebecca stepped back from the counter, giving space without being asked, and Maya remained where she was, grounded, steady, the moment began to loosen, not because it was resolved, but because it had revealed what it needed to reveal, and in that quiet, something deeper than apology settled into the air, something that did not erase the past, but changed the way it would be carried forward. The store did not return to what it had been. It settled into something quieter, something more aware, and Maya bent down slowly, gathering the few items that had fallen earlier, her movements unhurried, deliberate, as if reclaiming not just what was hers but the space around her that had shifted so suddenly, and no one rushed to help, not out of indifference, but out of a kind of respect that had replaced the earlier tension, a recognition that this moment belonged to her in a way it had not before. And as she stood again, the soft hum of the lights above seemed louder, clearer, the ordinary sounds of the store no longer background noise, but part of a world that had kept moving even as everything else had paused. And Rebecca remained a few steps away, not leaving yet, not stepping closer, her presence quieter now, no longer demanding attention but carrying the weight of what had been revealed. And for a brief second their eyes met again, not as opponents, not as strangers caught in conflict, but as two people standing on opposite sides of a moment that had changed both of them in ways neither had expected. And Maya gave a small nod, not dramatic, not symbolic, just enough to acknowledge that something had passed between them, something that did not need to be spoken again. And then she turned, not quickly, not sharply, but with a calm that felt grounded, her steps steady as she moved back toward the register, toward the place where her day had been interrupted and now continued. And the employee at the counter straightened slightly, her voice softer than before as she asked if Maya needed anything. And Maya shook her head gently, her focus already shifting forward, not forgetting what had happened, but not letting it hold her in place either. And behind her Rebecca exhaled slowly, the sound almost lost in the quiet, as if she were releasing something she had not known she was carrying. And she stepped back another inch, giving space not just physically, but in a way that acknowledged what could not be undone. And the manager glanced once more at the ceiling camera, its small lights still steady, still recording. But what mattered now was no longer what it had captured, it was what everyone had seen beyond it. And as customers resumed their routines, carts rolling, quiet, conversations returning, the moment did not disappear. It lingered in the way people looked at one another, in the slight pause before assumptions formed, in the awareness